The auteur theory refers to the notion that a film is primarily a product of its director's vision, that certain directors bring such a distinctive flavor to their work that they can be considered the movie's primary author, even more so than the writer of the screenplay. While the concept really emerged with the rise of the French New Wave in the 1940s and 50s, and was explored by writers in the French film magazine Cahiers du Cinéma, the popularization of the term itself is attributed to American film critic Andrew Sarris, who further explored the idea in his celebrated 1962 essay Notes on the Auteur Theory. At one point of the essay, Sarris argues that one of the theory's key principles is the distinguishable personality of the director as a criterion of value. He writes, "Over a group of films, a director must exhibit certain recurrent characteristics of style, which serves as his signature. The way a film looks and moves should have some relationship to the way a director thinks and feels." The auteur theory is most commonly applied to well-known directors such as Orson Welles, Alfred Hitchcock, Stanley Kubrick, Martin Scorsese, Tim Burton, Quentin Tarantino, and Christopher Nolan, all of whom bring certain stylistic quirks and characteristics to their movies, whether they wrote the screenplay or not, that makes these works easily identifiable as uniquely their own. For example, we have Hitchcock's recurring staircase sequences, or the pop culture references that are peppered throughout Tarantino's dialogue, or Nolan's time-bending narratives. Here I aim to discuss the auteur theory in relation to the work of Wes Anderson, who is arguably one of the most distinctive voices working in cinema today. With a feature film career that spans 25 years and 9 movies, with a 10th, The French Dispatch, due to release at some point this year, Anderson has developed a unique style that makes each of his films unmistakably Andersonian, to the point where some film fans jokingly claim that he's become his own genre. His style has been parodied by a sketch on Saturday Night Live, an episode of Family Guy, and YouTuber Patrick H. Willems in his mock trailer, What If Wes Anderson Directed X-Men? The most distinctive aspect of Wes Anderson's work is his visual style. Many of his shots, particularly those found in his later films, resemble paintings. Bright color palettes and heavy use of perfectly symmetrical profile shots are among his trademarks, creating an intentionally artificial-seeming aesthetic. Perhaps the best example of this is his critically acclaimed Oscar-winning film The Grand Budapest Hotel, which features hyper-stylized set design and pastel colors that pop right out of the screen. Pink, red, and purple are featured very heavily throughout this film, which gives it a distinctly candy-coated look that fits the whimsical, heightened reality it takes place in. The storytelling in Anderson's films relies heavily on visuals, as he's proven himself to be a strong example of a filmmaker who makes good use of mise en scène, a master of filling the screen with information without letting it become overwhelming or confusing. The Grand Budapest Hotel is his most meticulously crafted film to date, with nearly every frame rich with background detail and every character movement choreographed and performed with clockwork precision. Not unlike Orson Welles, Wes Anderson also frequently collaborates with the same people in his movies. Bill Murray, for example, has become something of a muse for the director, appearing in nearly all of his films with the only exception being his debut feature, Bottle Rocket. Other actors the director regularly works with are Tilda Swinton, Willem Dafoe, Jason Schwartzman, Angelica Houston, Adrian Brody, and the Wilson brothers. Frequent behind-the-scenes collaborators include composer Alexander Desplat, cinematographer Robert D. Yeoman, production designer Adam Stockhausen, and costume designer Melina Canonero. Although Anderson collaborates with all these very different and hugely talented people, he's almost like the director of an orchestra, in that he draws together their separate skills in service of his own unique vision. His work generally has a consistent tone. They are primarily comedies, but often with a melancholy or bittersweet undercurrent. His sense of humor is distinctly deadpan, with sometimes absurd dialogue delivered in a blunt and matter-of-fact way.
Does it concern you that your daughter has just run away from home?
That's a loaded question.
The general mood in his movies tends to be quite understated, but occasionally this mood will be broken in a comically jarring way. Take this scene from the Grand Budapest Hotel.
She's been murdered, and you think I did it.
Another characteristic associated with most of his films is the use of classic rock on his soundtracks, particularly over montages or scenes that unfold in slow motion. This is a trademark that goes all the way back to Bottle Rocket, which features a chase scene during the final act set to the Rolling Stones' 2000 Man. Many of Anderson's protagonists are portrayed as difficult or self-absorbed in some way, be it Rushmore's bright but arrogant overachiever Max Fisher, the egotistical title characters of both The Royal Tenenbaums and The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou, or the insecure Mr. Fox from Fantastic Mr. Fox, who admits that he doesn't feel good about himself if he senses that others aren't knocked out, dazzled, and slightly intimidated by him, and unwittingly puts his friends and family in danger in his quest to satisfy his own ego. Anderson seems particularly fascinated by dysfunctional familial dynamics. The Royal Tenenbaums and the Darjeeling Limited are all about this theme, with the former focusing on a patriarch trying to repair his broken relationship with his estranged wife and adult children, and the latter following three brothers who have not spoken to each other in a year as they reconnect on a train journey across India to find their mother. Even in films where family isn't necessarily the central theme, Anderson still often explores fractured or distant parent-child relationships. In The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou, the title character bonds with a young man who may or may not be his son. In Fantastic Mr. Fox, young Ash Fox is resentful of the fact that his father seems to offer more encouragement and praise to his cousin Christopherson than he does to him. Anderson's films also frequently feature characters who are outsiders or lonely souls forming connections with one another. The best example of this may be Moonrise Kingdom, in which two love-struck adolescents, one an orphaned foster boy and the other a rebellious young girl who feels misunderstood by her parents, conspire to escape their unhappy lives by running away together. Fantastic Mr. Fox is, to date, the only Wes Anderson film to be adapted from pre-existing source material, in this case a beloved children's book by Roald Dahl. However, while the film follows the same basic story as the original book, and includes a number of the same lines of dialogue, it remains a distinctly Wes Anderson picture, from its deadpan tone to its quirky characters to its precise shot composition. Anderson has written, or at least co-written, all of his movies to date, but if anybody else were to direct these scripts, they would simply not be the same. It's Anderson's singular, idiosyncratic vision that makes his movies what they are. In this way, Wes Anderson can indeed be described as a modern-day cinematic auteur.
You see, there are still faint glimmers of civilization left in this barbaric slaughterhouse that was once known as humanity. Indeed, that's what we provide in our own modest, humble, insignificant... fuck it.